It started as a simple leadership forum in Washington, but the moment Barack Obama stepped onto the stage, the night turned into a brutal showdown no one would forget. What began as polite speeches quickly exploded into raw confrontation when Barron publicly mocked Obama's birthplace in front of the entire nation, only for Obama to fire back with one devastating question that stripped the Trump family bare and left father and son speechless under the glaring lights. This wasn't just another political event, it was one of the biggest nights in Washington, D.C. this year. A high-profile leadership forum meant to bring together current and former leaders, business icons, and young voices to talk about the future of the country. The host stepped up to the microphone and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice a little shaky, "please welcome the former President of the United States, Barack Obama." The crowd clapped, some loudly, others just out of respect. Obama stood up slowly from the front row. He didn't rush. He walked onto the stage with that same easy confidence people remembered from his time in office. He gave a small nod to the audience, adjusted the mic, and started speaking in a warm, straightforward voice that felt more like a conversation than a speech. "Thank you," he began. "It's good to see so many of you here tonight. Leaders, thinkers, and especially the young people who are going to shape what comes next." He paused for half a second, then went straight to the point. "Let's talk about something real. The cost of living is crushing millions of hard-working American families right now. Groceries, rent, gas, everything keeps going up. Nearly 62% of Americans are struggling just to keep their heads above water. That's not a statistic. That's parents skipping meals so their kids can eat. That's families holding their breath every time the bills show up." The room got quieter. People were really listening. Obama's voice stayed calm but carried real weight. Leadership isn't about blaming the guy who came before you or the one coming after. It's not about pointing fingers. Leadership is about standing up right now and saying, "What can we do together to fix this?" It's about lifting hands, not pointing fingers. Then suddenly Obama turned his head and looked straight at the front row, right at Donald Trump and Barron. His voice dropped lower, slower, and sharper. Leadership is tested when the lights are brightest and when the family watching is your own. The words hit like a slap. Trump's jaw tightened hard. His hands clenched into fists on the armrest. Barron tried to play it cool, but the corner of his mouth twitched into a quick, nervous smirk. The applause for Obama had barely died down when Donald Trump pushed himself up from his seat. He buttoned his jacket with a sharp tug, adjusted his tie, and marched straight to the podium like he owned the place. The moment he grabbed the microphone, the whole mood in the hall flipped. The polite clapping stopped. Now it felt like a fight was about to break out. "Well, that was quite a speech," Trump started, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Barack talks about unity and compassion. Sounds real nice, doesn't it? But let's get to the truth. The problems we're seeing today, the crazy high prices, the inflation that's killing families, the border that's wide open, those didn't just happen by accident. They started when he was in charge. Obama left behind one big mess, and we're still paying for it." He pointed straight at Obama, who sat quietly in the front row with his hands folded. "You talk about lifting hands, Barack, but while you were talking, people couldn't afford groceries. Gas prices went through the roof. Families were hurting, and you did nothing but give more speeches." The crowd split right down the middle. Half the room started clapping and cheering, clearly fired up by Trump's direct style. The other half stayed dead silent, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Trump fed off the energy. He leaned into the mic and kept going, his voice getting louder and sharper with every sentence. Barack Obama loves to sound thoughtful. He loves to talk about teamwork and accountability. But talk is cheap, folks. Results are what matter, and the results were missing when he was running things. Inflation, unemployment, chaos at the border, all of it traces back to bad decisions made in the Obama years. He called Obama's name again and again, hammering the point home. "Obama, You never took responsibility. You never fixed what was broken. You just talked. And while you talked, America paid the price." The room buzzed louder. Some people stood up and clapped. Others whispered to each other, eyes wide at how fast things were heating up. Then Trump turned his head toward his son, sitting right beside where he had been. He leaned down slightly so the microphone still picked up his words, loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "Barron," he said with a smirk, "show them what real leadership sounds like, son." The whisper wasn't quiet at all. It was deliberate. Trump was handing the spotlight over right there in front of everyone, making it clear this wasn't just his fight anymore, it was becoming a family tag team. Barron looked up at his father, surprised for a split second, then gave a small nod. Trump stepped back from the podium with a satisfied grin and waved his hand toward his son. "Barron," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "the mic is yours." The hall went dead quiet. Barron stood up slowly, tall and composed, and walked to the podium like he had been waiting for this moment. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat once, and looked straight out at the crowd. His voice came out calm but ice cold. "Well, I guess we all appreciate a nice speech about unity and compassion," Barron started, "especially from someone who spent years dividing the country." A few sharp gasps rippled through the audience. He paused, then delivered the line everyone felt coming. "But some people still wonder if every president was even born to lead this country." The birth certificate jab landed hard. The room froze. Cameras clicked furiously. Half the crowd looked shocked, the other half waited to see what would happen next. But Barron wasn't done. He leaned closer to the mic and added another mocking line, dragging it out on purpose to make it hurt more. "Maybe some stories were never meant to be verified." That second sentence pushed the shock even deeper. It wasn't a quick 9-second hit anymore. It was a deliberate slap. Whispers exploded across the hall. Some people shook their heads. Others sat with their mouths slightly open. The tension jumped so high you could almost hear hearts pounding. Obama stayed seated in the front row, perfectly still. He didn't flinch. He didn't frown. But his eyes locked onto Barron with a sharp, bright flash that said everything without a single word. The former president looked calm on the outside, yet that steady gaze felt like a storm building behind it. The entire audience held its breath. No one moved. No one dared speak. Every eye in the packed hall was locked on Barack Obama. He sat perfectly still in the front row for a long moment, hands folded, face calm. Then, without any rush or drama, he slowly pushed his chair back and stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor echoed through the quiet room. Obama walked toward the podium with that familiar, steady stride everyone remembered from his days in the White House. He didn't look angry. He didn't look rattled. He just looked completely in control. He stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked straight at Barron Trump. His voice came out warm at first, but it quickly turned sharp like a razor blade hidden in silk. "Mocking someone's story never makes your own stronger, Barron," he said clearly, so every person in the hall could hear it. "And repeating the same old lines doesn't make them any more true." The room stayed dead quiet. Obama paused for half a second, letting his words sink in deep. Then he continued, his tone firm but still measured. "What you just did isn't confidence. It's imitation. You've picked up your father's tone, but you haven't picked up his experience. And that, son, is a dangerous mix." People in the audience started shifting in their seats. The tension was rising fast. Obama took a small breath and looked Barron dead in the eyes. Then he dropped the line that hit like a bomb. "Are you Ivanka's kid or Melania's?" The question exploded across the entire hall. A huge collective gasp burst out from the crowd all at once. It sounded like the whole room sucked in air at the same time. Cameras started flashing like crazy. Reporters leaned forward so hard some almost fell out of their chairs. Barron's face went completely pale in a heartbeat. The confident smirk he had been wearing disappeared instantly. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked stunned, like someone had just punched him in the gut. Right beside him, Donald Trump gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw locked shut and his face started turning red with pure anger. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. The shock was that heavy. Barron tried to recover quickly. He stood up fast from his seat, his hands shaking just a little, and shot back in a short, angry voice that carried across the stage. "That's low, sir." Obama didn't even blink. He used that exact moment like a perfect setup. He turned slightly toward Barron and fired right back, his voice still calm but now cutting even deeper. "Imitation without experience is just noise," he said. "You can try to sound tough like your dad, but without real understanding behind it, it's empty. That's exactly what we just heard from you." The words landed hard. Barron's face flushed bright red now, a mix of embarrassment and fury. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out right away. Trump shifted angrily in his chair, looking like he wanted to jump up and take over, but he stayed seated for the moment, his eyes burning holes into Obama. The entire audience was stunned into silence at first. Then whispers started spreading like wildfire through the rows. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others sat frozen, eyes wide open, trying to process the brutal comeback they had just witnessed. Obama stood at the podium, hands resting lightly on the edges, looking completely composed. He hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't shouted or thrown wild insults. But with just a few calm, precise sentences and that one direct question, he had flipped the entire moment around. Trump couldn't take it anymore. He shot up from his chair, face red with anger, and stormed toward the podium. He tried to grab the microphone right out of Obama's hand. "You're attacking my family," Trump barked, his voice loud and sharp. "This is low even for you, Barack. Leave my kids out of this." Obama didn't step back. He didn't raise his voice. He simply raised one hand calmly and cut Trump off mid-sentence. "I'm not attacking your family, Mr. President," he said in that steady, clear tone. "I'm just holding up a mirror. Let's talk about what you actually said in 2006. Obama looked straight at the audience and quoted the exact words Trump had once said on record. "If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her." The quote hit the room like a slap. Gasps and shocked murmurs spread everywhere. Some people covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Obama kept going without missing a beat. That's not just a slip of the tongue. That's a living example of what happens when vanity replaces values. When a father talks about his own daughter that way, sons learn the wrong lesson. They learn that disrespect and mockery are okay as long as you say them with confidence. Trump stood there fuming, his hands clenched into fists. Before he could fire back, Barron jumped up for the second time. He stepped forward, voice shaking with anger but trying to sound strong. "My father built this country," Barron shouted. "He made America great again while you were busy giving speeches." Obama turned toward Barron and nodded slowly, almost like a teacher listening to a student. Then he looked at the host and said calmly, "Can we show the short clip, please? The one that's been public for years." The big screen behind the stage lit up. A quick, well-known video clip started playing. Trump on a talk show years ago, smiling and saying flattering things about Ivanka in a way that made the whole room uncomfortable. The words were clear, the tone, the comparison, the way he spoke about his own daughter. The clip lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like it lasted forever. When it ended, the hall was buzzing with whispers and nervous shifting. Obama pointed at the screen and spoke directly to Barron. "This is what you were taught to repeat, son. This is the example you saw growing up. Imitation without real values just creates more noise. That's why we're standing here tonight having this conversation." The room exploded with reactions. Half the crowd was stunned into silence, the other half whispering furiously. Barron's face turned bright red again. He looked at his father for help, but Trump was already losing control. Trump pushed past Barron and started walking straight toward the stage, clearly ready to take over the microphone by force. His face was flushed with rage, and he looked like he was about to explode. Obama raised his hand calmly, stopping Trump in his tracks without even touching him. "Leadership isn't about shouting louder, Mr. President," Obama said, his voice still steady and strong. "It's about teaching better. That's the difference we're seeing right here tonight." At that moment, the entire hall started to stand up. Some people rose because they were shocked by the raw evidence. Others stood because of the heavy weight of what had just been shown and said. The room filled with a mix of applause, gasps, and murmurs. Cameras flashed non-stop. The power had shifted again, and this time it felt final. Trump stopped halfway to the stage, breathing hard, looking around at the crowd that was no longer fully on his side. Barron stood frozen beside his father, the confidence from earlier completely gone. Obama stood at the podium looking out over the stunned crowd. The energy in the hall was electric after everything that had just happened. He took one slow breath and spoke in that same calm, powerful voice that had carried him through the entire night. "True power doesn't need noise," he said clearly. "It needs control. When families turn insults into habits, they forget what respect looks like. And when respect disappears, so does real leadership." His words landed with heavy weight. No one clapped right away. The room was too busy absorbing what he had just said. Obama didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it sit there, letting every person in the audience feel it. Then he added one last thought, his voice warm but firm. "Leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about being real. It's about lifting people up instead of tearing them down, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." He turned his head slightly toward Donald Trump and Barron, who were still standing near the front. The entire hall watched them closely. Trump's face was tight with frustration. Barron looked lost, his earlier confidence completely drained. Obama didn't shout at them. He didn't point fingers or gloat. Instead, he spoke quietly, loud enough for the microphone to catch, but soft enough to feel personal. "Go home," Obama said simply. "Reflect. That's leadership too." Those few words hit harder than any shout could have. Trump stiffened. For a second, it looked like he wanted to argue back, but the weight of the room stopped him. Barron glanced at his father, then looked down at the floor. The two of them had no choice but to turn and walk back toward the side exit. Every eye in the hall followed them. The silence was deafening. No one cheered, no one booed. People just watched as the father and son left their seats under the bright lights, forced to exit while the whole country seemed to be watching. Obama didn't chase them. He didn't say another word to push them out. He simply stepped back from the podium, gave one small, respectful nod to the audience, and began walking off the stage. There was no dramatic mic drop. There was no victory smile or fist pump. Just that quiet, composed walk. The cameras followed him all the way. The crowd stayed mostly silent at first, still processing everything they had seen. Then, slowly, the applause started. It wasn't wild cheering. It was a deep, respectful clapping that grew louder as Obama made his way toward the exit. Even people who had come to support Trump found themselves standing and clapping. The sound filled the grand hall like a wave. Obama didn't turn around. He kept walking with his head high, his shoulders relaxed, that same calm expression on his face. Outside the building, the cool night air hit him as he stepped through the double doors. A line of reporters waited with microphones and cameras ready, hoping for one last comment. Obama simply raised his hand politely and said, "Good evening, everyone. Let's all take a breath." He gave them a small smile, got into his waiting car, and closed the door. Through the window, people could still see that peaceful, steady look on his face as the car pulled away. Back inside the hall, the atmosphere felt heavy and unreal. Trump and Barron had already slipped out through a side door. They walked to their own car in complete silence. No loud statements, no final words for the cameras. just the heavy sound of their footsteps and the weight of the night pressing down on them. The once loud and confident duo left without another word, the earlier fire completely gone. That night, clips of the event spread across the internet like wildfire. But what stayed with people wasn't the shouting or the sharp jabs, it was the contrast. Trump and Barron's anger versus Obama's calm, the loud attacks versus the quiet lesson. And most of all, it was that simple, graceful walk off the stage. Obama hadn't needed to raise his voice to win the room. He hadn't needed to humiliate anyone to make his point. He simply stood tall, stayed in control, and reminded everyone watching that real leadership doesn't shout to be heard. It earns respect through dignity and grace. In the days that followed, people kept talking about it. Parents, young people, politicians, everyone seemed to carry a piece of that night with them. The final image that burned in everyone's mind was Obama stepping into his car with that quiet smile, while the others drove away in heavy silence. Because in the end, the calmest person in the room had been the one truly in control all along.